I didn't expect the kind of performance I got out of these lenses. They deliver. The reason I wanted to take on this video was a couple reasons. First and foremost, I get a lot of requests from a number of viewers who don't have the budget that, watch Leica and Hasselblad and other camera systems that I talk about that are very, very expensive. They're looking for more budget-friendly options. They're always asking me, hey, Bobby, I only have this amount of money. What can I get for this? Or I'm looking for a good lens, but I only have this amount. What should I get? And so when Sirui approached me to say, hey, would I be interested to do a video like this? I thought, why not? While I like talking about high-end gear, it's great to talk about the grail stuff. This is more realistic for a lot of users out there. And so I wanted to bring this sort of information to you guys in a much more, easy, digestible way, talk about real-world experiences with it, actually taking it out there in the real world. With that said, full disclosure, this video is brought to you by Sirui. However, they have no say in my script. They have no idea what I'm going to say in advance. These are my thoughts and my thoughts only. All they're there for is technical support to make sure that I get the correct specs into it, but that's pretty much it. Top line, for around 466 grams for the 75 1.2. The 16 1.2 is around 380 plus grams. That's depending on the amount that you get. It's two spherical elements. This does not have any spherical elements. They have a difference in terms of rendering. We'll talk about all that later on in the video. These are well-made lenses, especially for the price point. These are metal construction. You got a little bit of this faux carbon fiber inside there, which looks really nice. But you got this knurled sort of focusing right here that's very smooth, very precise, feels great. Outside of that, it feels good. The hoods are plastic, so keep that in mind. And I think the 75 hood feels a little bit better than the 16 hood, but we'll get to that in a bit when I get to this lens. But overall, it's a really good lens. Electronic contacts in the back of it. You do have a USB-C port, and that's for firmware update. No weather sealing, unfortunately, but again, most lenses you could probably get out there with a little bit of rain, you're going to be okay. But obviously, you're going to be into a storm. You probably want to take this out there. But again, for the price point for both of these lenses in a kit, I'm not complaining, guys, at all. And we're not even talking about the optics just yet. They come in 3 different colors, as you probably know. Black, a silver, and a white. Now, they're all kind of cool and they kind of match a lot of the APS-C cameras that are out there. I went for the black because I'm testing it on a variety of different cameras and I thought black's easiest to match with. The silver is quite cool. White, if you're daring, it's a bright white. It's cool, but black was more my speed. Anyway, you got a kind of a two-tone effect with the blue ring. They've done a really nice job with these lenses. And, look, if you've never heard of Sirui making lenses before, you see tripods being marketed online. Actually, they've been making cinema lenses for quite a period of time, even anamorphic lenses. Now, they've always come in more of a budget-friendly approach, and they're not going to match some of the top-tier cinema lenses out there, but they do produce pretty good lenses. And these are a kind of brother or sister, if you call them that, from the Nightwalker series. So still the same cinema glass and design, but brought into a more consumer-oriented photographer lens that has autofocusing inside of it. Let's get into talking about image quality because that's where these lenses surprised me the most. As you saw from the sample images at the beginning of this video, I actually went to what's called Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios here in Singapore. Now, I believe they have this in California as well, and maybe Florida, if I'm not mistaken. They kind of transform the park at night to be, like a haunted house. And they have various different haunted houses, but they've got dancers and they've got music acts and they've got smoke and creatures walking around. It's quite cool. And you can ride the rides as well. And I thought this would be a great place to test a 1.2 lens because it's low light. The lighting's not always going to be optimal. If you bring an f2, 2.8, you're really going to crank up the ISO. And I had to crank up the ISO at some points with this lens because I want to capture fast-moving people. So you got to crank it up, right? You got to make a decision. Higher shutter speed to capture action or, deal with ISO. So I balanced between the two. And when I came back after taking the images, and I went back in Lightroom and I was looking at them, I'm going, yeah, this is pretty good. And this 75 1.2's got it's got an interesting look. It's not super modern rendering. It reminds me of a lens. If I was to get a vintage lens from the 80s or 90s, it's got that kind of vibe to it. It's not 100% well corrected. You're going to still get some chromatic aberrations here and there. At 1.2, it's a little bit softer. It's still sharp, but it's softer than it would be at f2 and beyond that, where it gets really sharp. But I love the pop this lens gives you. It gives you a really nice 3D pop. Now, of course, the 75 1.2 and APS-C, so if you equate this to full frame, it's around 112 millimeters. So you're getting, some decent compression, kind of a longer focal range at a 1.2. You're going to get some really nice depth of field. And you get that with this. The images have character. That's the best way to put it. And I like that. If I want a very well-corrected lens that's extremely modern, there's a lot of options out there. But I like something like this that gives you autofocusing, but at the same time, it reminds me of the rendering of some of my manual focus older lenses. And the autofocusing is relatively fast. Now, again, is it going to be the same speed as, let's say, the new 85 1.4 GM2 from Sony? Not quite there, okay? Different price point, differently. But I was able to capture fast-moving subjects, even at horse races with this. I could use it, and I grabbed the horses, and I grabbed people dancing at night. These girls that were really dancing and giving it their all, they're moving fast. I was grabbing focus. Eye tracking, subject tracking, not a problem with this. And I was testing it on the A7RV, mind you. Don't have an APS-C camera, but I figured, okay, 60 megapixels, you crop down, I still have some room to play with. And while that camera's not a low light performance beast, it does pretty well. Were there any cons to this lens? When you first acquire focus on a subject, it could take a little bit of a beat before it grabs it. It's not going to be like, as I mentioned, a GM lens where it's super fast. It's going to be, got it. But once it's in the vicinity, it's grabbing and it's holding. And so that would be the only caveat. But again, you're not using this lens for fast action photography. You're going to use it for portraiture. You're going to use it for lifestyle. You can use it for faster moments, sure, but it's not designed to be that way, at least in my personal opinion. But the images that I got out of this, I was really happy with it. Now, let's move on to the 16 1.2. As I mentioned on this channel a few times, I'm not a big, super wide angle shooter, right? Now, I think equating this to full frame is around 22, 24 millimeters thereabouts. So it gives you a more of a decent perspective. But 1.2 is nice to have on a wide angle lens like this because you're going to get some nice depth of field, especially if you want to capture sort of environmental portraits and, people moving around. And I got a lot of those at Halloween Horror Nights, especially. Some of these guys are dressed as vampires, walking around and coming close. I'm like, snap, snap, snap. Even some of the girls as well. There's this one girl that walked by me. She was screaming, "Ah!" This crazy, they really get into it. And I got this image with her and I looked at it like, wow, the whole perspective is really cool. And again, if I didn't have this lens that I was testing it, I would have gone with this. Now the image probably would have looked good, but it may not have had that sort of that oddity to the look of it that gives you a sort of that craziness vibe, especially when you have this girl in a mask screaming at you. The whole perspective with this that this lens gives you, tied in with that subject, it worked brilliantly in my personal opinion. Now, in terms of the autofocusing, I felt this was slightly faster. I mean, this is obviously 16, so, wider, it's going to grab a little bit faster. Has two spherical elements inside of this, so it's going to be a little bit better corrected than this 1.2. Sharpness, you're really going to see the sharpness coming into play really from f2 and beyond that. 1.2, it's decent. Is it as sharp as the 75? I'd say they were very, very similar. This could be a hair sharper at 1.2. They complement each other in a very interesting way. This is like ultra wide and this is like kind of long, you know what I mean? So this is a nice 1-2 kit to have with you. And especially when I was walking around Universal Studios that night, I was going back and forth quite often because I'm like, ooh, this would look interesting with a wide angle. And then, okay, no, I really want to, get some compression here. I want to sort of isolate the subject. Let's try this. And I found them working really well together. And these lenses, again, for the price point, because you have to talk about that, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. And so if you are a Fujifilm X mount user, if you're a Nikon Z mount user, you have the ZFC, Z50, whatever Z camera it is, right? And that's APS-C. And you're thinking, I need a lens, I want a prime, and I'm not really getting those primes from Nikon. This is a great option to have. Now for Sony, you have a little bit more, room to play with, but I still really like the performance out of these. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, the one thing about this lens was the hood on this. It's not bad, but I felt it's not as solid as the 75 1.2 hood. It feels a little bit light, and putting it on can just, be a little bit challenging at times, but once you line up the markers, these, it takes you a little bit with the hood, right? Once you get it on, it's on and it's decent. But That's just my only caveat with this lens. And it's definitely not a deal breaker. I mean, a hood's a hood, right? And I think for you guys out there that are on a budget and you're looking for 2 good primes to go with your APS-C camera, or even a full frame camera that's got higher megapixels, this is not a bad option to go with. Sirui's done a pretty good job with these autofocusing lenses. And you know what? I'm hoping they come out with full frame versions of these lenses down the road, because APS-C is nice, but full frame, if they can give this kind of image quality in full frame, these are going to really give companies like Viltrox and other brands out there that are doing that sort of similar thing a run for their money. And at the same time, giving you some really good kits in terms of a 16-75 and other series lenses that they make as well. You could have a nice setup for minimal money and produce some really awesome images. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on the lenses. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you have any questions, hit me up. I'll try to answer those for you guys. If you like this video, like, subscribe, share with your friends. Helps me out a lot. Thanks again for the support, and I'll chat to you all very, very soon. Take care.